Today, video games are ingrained in our culture. If you are watching this video, you have a device that can play games, and you probably do play. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry spanning generations, but there was a time when the medium was new, when people had to have it explained to them what video games were, how they worked, and what they meant. The 1970s and early 80s saw the dawn of interactive home entertainment, people using technology to entertain and challenge themselves and each other, and this week on the Videocast, we will see the different ways this new world was sold to us through aesthetics. We will be covering the first two generations of home video game consoles, seeing how they were marketed, different commercials, print ads, as well as how they were sold at retail. Very excited for this. As always, I'm your host Brian, and this video was made possible thanks to our patrons over at patreon.com/pixandportraits. Bunch of great stuff over there, exclusive videos, as well as digital copies of my book, The Nostalgia Economy, which is themed around retro gaming and collecting. $5 get you access to all that, helps keep us going. We also have physical copies, t-shirts, like, comment, share, hype, it all helps, so please consider supporting us any way that you can. Now, we have a pretty extensive history of video games through the lens of retrofuturism, where we go console by console, year by year. Check that out for a detailed history of gaming, including arcades. In this video, I'd like to just look at the aesthetics employed by video game companies and advertisers to not only sell people video games, but to sell them on the idea of video games at home, because this really was a new idea. Video games required a television, which, in the 1970s, was still a relatively recent invention, very similar to the internet today. It had been around for a few decades, and had become more affordable and accessible. Some were still in black and white, but an entire generation had grown up with it, or on it. It wasn't new, but innovations were still being made, and throughout the decade, the way TVs were marketed was very similar to what we'll see with video games. Futuristic, devices floating through space, neon colors, vector graphics, cutting-edge stuff. Juxtaposing all of this against reality, the yellows and browns that were popular during this era, the real world was very dull, lots of wood patterns, wood grain, muted colors. We see this early on with the Magnavox Odyssey. For the console itself, your imagination was doing a lot of heavy lifting here. You'd place an overlay on the TV screen, and most games played the same, but this was the first home console. It was promoted as the electronic game of the future, even though most of the marketing was very rooted in the time that it was produced, 1972, some holdover from the 1960s, the logo here and the jingle. Very in line with 60s sci-fi, promising you a better life. The latter part of the decade saw a surge of interest in video games, fueled by the popularity of arcades and advancing technology. The home market was flooded with different games and consoles that really weren't so different. There was a lot of clones, popular games, or systems even, completely ripped off, rebranded, bad ports of arcade games, very little quality control. It was the Wild West. This would eventually lead to the industry crashing, but this was also the golden age. This is the foundation, the peak of the medium's popularity up until that time, and probably still in the minds of many. I'm sure when most people think of this period, they imagine it with neon blues, pinks, bright colors that have since become associated with the time, well into the 1980s. Everything didn't look like this, but these aesthetics capture people's imaginations so much that they've since impacted public perception and memories of the time. This is how people remember the late 70s and early 80s. Much of this was covered in that retrofuturism video I mentioned earlier, but it cannot be understated just how important the idea of the future was to marketing video games early on. I say it all the time that aesthetics are more than just visual qualities. They can embody different ideas, feelings, vibes, and that is absolutely what is happening here. We were pretty late into the space age, some cracks were showing, but there was still a ton of optimism and excitement for the future, and these ads and aesthetics embody that. This was new, this was cutting edge, this was the future. One motif we see a lot is games coming out of the screen. Atari and television, Magnavox, the action is so exciting your TV cannot contain it, so immersive, so realistic, it's like it's coming to life. You're in the game, you are the game. The colors, again, neon, blue, pink, green, the graphics left a lot to be desired, but the visuals were stimulating and aesthetically exciting. I love these print ads here for the Odyssey 2. Unlike its predecessor, the Odyssey 2 really leaned into science fiction and fantasy. In early gaming, box art went a long way, given the tech limitations of the time. They had to grab the consumer's attention and give them something to think about as they navigated the primitive graphics, which were interesting in their own way, but didn't always resemble what was being promised. Something else interesting about the 1980s is the influence the 1950s had over its marketing. You saw this a lot throughout the decade, and it makes sense, given the people creating these ads would have grown up in the 50s. They were targeting kids or younger people using their own nostalgia, but seeing music, tropes, and aesthetics from that time, promoting what was otherwise marketed as the future, is pretty funny. At point of sale, retail, we again return to reality. Very in line with the time, nothing special, the product on display. Customers could test out the games on display models with TVs, systems, and companies taking over entire aisles or sections of stores. Simple signage, the company's name and logo. Nothing like we'd see just a few years later with Nintendo. Looking at some of the prices, these were very expensive, similar to what consoles go for now, not adjusted for inflation. People like to complain about prices now, but gaming has always been a luxury hobby, very expensive. I was not alive back then, and it's interesting seeing the groundwork being laid for literally the next 30-odd years. Before the retail apocalypse, this is how most video game sections in stores were laid out. Again, this is before my time, but I absolutely recognize my world and childhood here. Depending on interests, I'd love to continue this series into the 90s and 2000s, but that's going to do it for today. Let me know what you think. What memories do you have at this time? Do these aesthetics speak to you? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, share, and again, if you have the means, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Read The Nostalgia Economy. As always, thank you so much for your interest in this channel, and thanks for watching. See you in the future.